Welcome to Holocaust Remembrance Around the World, a new series featuring guests from all over the world, the people whose work shapes and reshapes Holocaust memory and education, placing the past in a current, relevant, and local context. I'm Shai Pilnik, the director of the Emil and Jenny Fish Holocaust and Genocide Studies Center at Yeshiva University. Today we have a very special guest, a guest who will help us find out how the three following items somehow connect to each other. You have to listen to me. An Evian mineral water bottle, a former baseball player, and a World War II Jewish refugee settlement.
How does a baseball player from Michigan State turned high-tech executive become an influential historian, one that solidifies the historical record on both sides of the Atlantic? On the surface, he seems like an ordinary middle-class man from the United States. But one doesn't have to talk with Hugh Baver very long to see that his activism in community building and history will leave a positive impact for generations to come. This is the story of Elihu Hugh Baver.
Good afternoon, you.
Good afternoon. Happy spring. Happy first day of spring to you.
And same to you. Same to you. In Holocaust Remembrance Around the World, we're featuring the Dominican Republic today. The Dominican Republic is a country that we will learn played actually a significant role in the grander story of the Holocaust as a safe haven, as a country that offered safe haven to Jews of Europe during World War II. It's interesting that we connect with an American citizen and a Bostonian. No, you actually grew up in New Hampshire, you told me before, who found the story of the Dominican Republic so compelling that you decided to move there. And you're actually speaking to us now, you from the northern part of the country, from a town called Cabarete. Did I pronounce it properly?
Correct, on the north coast, right next to Sosua, correct.
And the story of the Dominican Republic, the refugee settlement Sosua, led you to move there and to also become the founding director of an organization called Sosua75. So we have so much to talk about you, your journey, about Sosua, about the story of the Dominican Republic, the dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, and how it connected with the story of the Holocaust. But let's begin, first of all, with you, or Elihu. Your Hebrew name. Tell me a little bit about your journey, which is a fascinating journey from baseball, from being an IBM executive to the world of Jewish and Holocaust history, and also Dominican history.
Well, let me start by saying I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to present in this very exciting series and from such an esteemed university as well. So this is a really huge honor. So I hope that this is as captivating a topic for our watchers, listeners, as it has been for me. But we had the initial association meeting back in 2017, where I came to the Yeshiva there, and with Dr. Karen Shawn, we put a small class on for the master's degree education department, at which point I had a chance to visit the Yeshiva for actually the very first time. So this is now a second time engagement with the Yeshiva, and couldn't be happier, just to frame everything for starters.
That's wonderful. So tell me a little bit about where your journey begins and when you find out, first of all, when do you find out the story about the positive role that the Dominican Republic, both as a nation and its controversial dictator Trujillo, played in the story of the Holocaust?
Yes, it's a very deep story in the sense that once you start to peel back the onion a little bit, you, like many people, I should say, who really don't know these stories, I always call them, and even on my website, the little known stories of both what happened in Evian, France in 1938, which was, of course, the Conference of Nations that was called prior to even the United Nations being formed. And the fact that at that conference, of the 32 countries that were invited, only the Dominican Republic agreed to loosen their immigration and quotas for allowing safe haven for these Jewish refugees who were fleeing Nazi Germany. And that story in itself is a compelling story, but then obviously what happened afterward, which was the formation of this small community of refugees, which ultimately ended up being 700 or thereabouts on the North Coast in Sosua, which started from land that Trujillo, as you said, Rafael Trujillo, who was the leader, the dictator in the country from 1930 to 1961, as part of his concession for, we'll get into it in our discussion, based on other world events he was a part of, for whatever reason, he directed his diplomats at that conference to open the borders to up to 100,000 Jews to come, and also on very liberal terms of giving them land and making it as easy as possible for them. Again, this, I always call this like a Gilligan's Island story. I'm showing my age here, but it's kind of like these folks being dropped into a tropical, paradise, trying to make a life out of it. So the interconnected nature of both of these stories really is what really pieces it together. And that's what I feel somehow I stumbled upon and I'm working in.
So let's pause for a moment. We should talk about Trujillo and the role he played, but do you remember the moment when you found out about the story, and what were you doing at that time, and what did it lead to?
Absolutely. This was in 2010, and very briefly, I had the opportunity to attend a Boston Red Sox fantasy camp, which is basically where they bring players in who are kind of, I won't say washed up, but a chance to kind of relive their glory years. And it was at that camp, and with the result of relationships and introductions that were made, that I had a chance to come to the Dominican Republic and tour the Boston Red Sox Academy. Boston Red Sox have always been my favorite team. So on the rung of professional level baseball, the bottom rung is the academies that are on the south coast of the island. There's 26 of them representing major league teams. So I had the chance to visit this academy, and it was at that academy that one of the folks who was there actually mentioned to me, knowing that I was Jewish, or learning that I was Jewish, that there's this a community on the north coast of the island that has these beautiful stained glass windows, and that has Jewish origins. And from there, I was captivated. We finished our business, but I remember on the flight back home, I was diligently looking on the internet, like, what is the story? And then I just became completely enthralled with it, particularly because of its relevance to contemporary issues of immigration and refugees today, and that this is a great example of a community that was formed out of struggle, but that ended up being successful, and we'll talk about that more.
Okay, so the Dominican Republic really appears on the scenes of, for those of you who are familiar with the history of the Holocaust, with the Evian Conference. Really begins with the Evian Conference. Tell us a little bit about the Evian Conference. Yes, Evian, that is a city in France situated by a lake, right?
Exactly.
And the lake is where we have the water from. We actually have an image. Maybe we can see the images.
Yes, that's actually a historic postcard from yesteryear that shows, you can see the Lac Le Mans, which is really
so that's the name of the lake. The name of the lake is Le Mans. I'm sorry. No.
Exactly. No, and you can see across the way there's Lausanne, which is Switzerland. So that's basically the border between Switzerland on the left, and on the right is France. And up on the hillside there's a hotel that's standing out. That is the Royal Evian Hotel, which is where this conference took place.
Yeah, I think we have an image of the hotel. Maybe if yep.
That's a beautiful photo, by the way, because that also shows that is the actual place where the Evian spring, where the water comes up. So after being in the 15 years in the mountains, it makes its way down and through the aquifers, and then is collected up. So again, most people know Evian for their spring water, not for the significance of this big conference, but that is actually a place where you can go and fill your bottle with Evian water for free. It's the spring.
Yes, and so the Evian Conference happens in the summer of 1938. Nazi Germany increases its persecution of Jews. The world community, the international community, is trying to figure out a solution for that. Delegations from representatives from all over the world convene in Evian. And then what happens?
Yes, exactly. Prior to that, of course, was the Anschluss, from Austria and Germany, and it was called upon the direction of FDR, who was facing a lot of international pressure about this growing refugee situation in Europe. So he's the one who called the conference. He actually sent Myron Taylor to be the representative for the United States, who actually was the president of U.S. Steel Company at the time. So he was the one who kicked off the conference. And again, these 32 representatives from largely countries in South America, interestingly, and also Europe, attended this. But over the 90 period from July 6th through the 15th, basically one representative or delegate after another stood up and gave a grandiose speech and of basically why they couldn't accept any more refugees or lessen their quotas. Again, this is also around the time of the Depression, and there was a lot of economic strife at the time. But basically, the whole crux of it was that the only country that admitted the Jews and opened their borders was the Dominican Republic, which was huge, because after that, Hitler got up on a grand stage and said, well, obviously, if nobody cares about the Jews, why should I? And if you look at the chronology closely, Kristallnacht follows very closely on November 9th. So this is, it almost gave cause for justification for him to do, we ultimately know the final solution after that.
And also we remember infamously that Australia, for instance, also provided an explanation for why they would decline any refugees. They have their own racial problems, and they don't want to import one from Europe, right?
Exactly. Now, since some of these countries have since come back and have issued statements of apology for what happened in 1938 and that whole thing. But yeah, that was one of quite a few comments that were basically the sob story of, I'm sorry, we can't take anybody in. Correct.
So the Dominican Republic is ruled by Rafael Trujillo. We actually have an image of his that maybe we can pull out. And he decides to take them. I know that he allows 100,000 refugees, a substantial number. The number of refugees who arrive is much lower. But still, there were, I think you mentioned 7,000, right? 7,000.
No, that's 700.
700, I'm sorry, 700. So a number significantly lower than the number he proposed, but still, in Judaism, we consider the one who saves one life as the one who saves the whole world.
Exactly.
It seems as if he made an incredible gesture of kindness towards the Jewish people, but the story is more complicated than that. So maybe you can touch upon maybe the darker side of Rafael Trujillo's legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So from, again, 1930 until 1961 was when he ruled. And again, this was back in 1938 at the beginning of it. The motivations for what was really in his agenda for why he decided to accept the European refugees in the Dominican Republic is very well debated, we'll put it that way, from some historians and scholars. And a lot of it is related to his wanting to, it was very interesting that here are refugees that are coming from religious persecution in Germany, and they're coming into the hands of Rafael Trujillo and his care, where he was very racially, he hated the darker skinned Haitians. And in just a few months before the Evian conference, he had conducted something called the Parsley Massacre, which was right on the Haitian-Dominican border, where there were reported up to 25,000 Haitians that were murdered and thrown into the river. In fact, it's known as El Corte, or the cutting. So I think he was trying to make amends in the world's eyes for this action, and as well as his own agenda in his head that he wanted to lighten and brighten the race, is what he said. And
what does that mean? What does that mean, lighten and brighten the race?
Well, if you intermarry, if you're a European and you intermarry with an African-American person or someone who's dark skinned, you're going to produce, generally speaking, lighter offspring. So that was part of his. You may have noticed in that past photo, he put on a lot of pancake makeup. So in so much as Rafael Trujillo, was very racially charged himself against dark-skinned Haitians, he used to put on, like Michael Jackson, like light-colored powder to make his face look lighter. So a lot of the photos that you see of him are him touched up with lighter makeup. So wherever his motivation was in that regard, obviously anything racially bad is not good. But that was what is known to be the two major reasons why he admitted it was a timing thing. He wanted to look good in the world's eyes, and he also had this hidden agenda.
And what happens in Sosua? When do immigrants, Jewish immigrants, start to arrive at the shores of the Dominican Republic? Where do they live? Tell us a little bit about the conditions. We actually have a photo, I believe, of the refugees just getting off the bus.
Yes. And this is what's been fascinating. And I'm gonna make a shout out here while she's positioning these photos to 3 of the original settlers here who have been kind enough to actually within the last week reach out and contact me. I couldn't be more thrilled. And that is Alfred Weinberg. He is the first known as settler number 1. Also Marcel Solomon. He's 86. These folks are in their upper 80s, as well as Renee Kirshheimer. So I think they're all on this broadcast. So hello.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Hello.
But they really started from scratch. They tried a number of different industries at first. They tried mattress making and growing. We got mattress making and growing tomatoes, and they tried to do the plant other things. It turned out that the pasture land, it was better to make this ocean area pasture land and raise cows. And ultimately they were the beginner. They started Productos Sosua, which was a dairy cooperative, which started in Sosua that made dairy products, incidentally pork as well, which is a whole nother story. But they raised cows, pigs, made cheese, and imported it within the country, and then ultimately out of the country. But it was a very successful, ultimately, entity. So they came in 1940. They built barracks where they lived in. They were similar barracks, and that was the start of it, 1940. And that was the first wave. There's actually 7 waves shy. The first was known as Los Pioneros, which means the pioneers, and there were 7 different waves that ultimately made it. Even the last one was in 1947 from Shanghai, interestingly, but 7 total waves that constituted that 700 folks who basically were saved from ultimately what we knew happened to the rest in the Holocaust.
How many of them remained in the Dominican Republic? I suppose that the Jewish community in the Dominican Republic today is very small.
Correct. It's very, very small. There's a Chabad house and there's a synagogue in Santo Domingo, which is the capital. And then also this here in Sosua was the first established synagogue in the whole country as a result of this. And not, by the way, that there isn't a tremendous amount of Jewish Latino history here, because that goes back to the 1850s. And ultimately, if you wanted to talk about even Christopher Columbus, who was purported to be Jewish or have Jewish folks on his boats in 1492. But anyway, for the most part, Sosua era started in 1940, moving forward.
So this is all a piece of history. I know that you have passion for history, but you really managed to connect the history with activism. So tell us about your activism. So you learned about it, you were fascinated. This is a fascinating piece of history. I know that, teachers who read about a compelling chapter in the history of the Holocaust normally want to share it with their students, but they don't necessarily want to move to the Dominican Republic or actually do a reenactment, almost like a recreation of the Evian conference. And the amount of activities that come from your prolific mind is just incredible. So tell us about, you moved there, and maybe we can also, our coordinator Odaya can show us a photo of your house. The house I believe you're about to buy, right? Which is in Sosua.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wish we could buy it. At this point, we're lucky to be able to rent it and habitate it and occupy it, especially as a base of operations to, there it
Oh,
is.
so you're renting it. Yeah.
That's my wife and I, and that's the home that's just below. It's right on the point. You can see Puerto Plata off in the distance. So it's going to be a rehab job, but for the opportunity to be a part of history and actually live in one of the buildings. This was where a lot of the United Fruit Company executives, which was of course the property that was given by Trujillo, which was a banana plantation in 1940. This is one of the buildings that housed the United Fruit Company executives and ambassadors who came to the area. So I hope it has a lot of good spirits in it, and it's going to be a great place to recount the history from. Trying to think of the other aspects of that question, because I know there were a lot of pieces to it.
Wow. So you move, as we can see in the picture, you moved to Sosua, and you established Sosua75.
Correct.
Why the number 75? Please tell us about it.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was 2014 when I first came here to actually the North Coast. I'd been here before, again, on these baseball trips. It was the first time I ever had the chance to come to Sosua. And it was, I was so taken by the fact that whenever I told anybody, even very learned people within the Jewish community at universities, they said, geez, I never knew that story. And of course, there's so many incredible stories of survival from the Holocaust. And this is just one of many in a very small chapter, but notable. And I decided, based on the fact that everyone who I talked to about it said, I've never heard of this before, that I would start this nonprofit, which would be able to amplify the merits of it and the contemporary relevance of this to immigration and refugee challenges of today, with, build bridges, not walls, et cetera. And we thought the best way to do this would be to actually move here. So instead of doing Zoom calls, and of course we never knew the coronavirus was going to hit, so there's worse places to be stranded, I'll tell you that. But we certainly were able to meet face to face with a lot of the folks, and many of the original settlers after the war was over went back and moved back to Miami. You could find large populations in Miami and New York City and even Los Angeles and all around. It's a diaspora of which is what's been fascinating actually now, is to be contacted in light of people now learning about this and my journey and my passion, that they want to contribute their stories. They can't wait to tell me these stories, and a lot of them, there's only a limited time, I think, that we need to capture them. So it was a big move for my wife and I to come from Boston and pack up all of our things, but it's been a very wonderful experience, and it continues to be, and it's going to be.
And how do you find the Dominicans in terms of, let's say, their position on Jewish-Christian relations, on Israel, and the key questions that concern Jews today? Do you find it to be a friendly environment?
One of the first, my apologies. One of the first aspects that when I came here, when I spoke to some of these original settlers, that most stood out to me was how they recounted that when they came here, that they felt no prejudice whatsoever. They never felt ostracized for being Jewish. They were allowed to do their own thing pretty much. And even now today, I can see, even now me coming here 80 years later or whatever, that it's the same attitude. They really don't care. The Dominican people have an extremely warm heart. It's a culture that not only loves baseball, which of course was an attracting feature for me, but they also they love family and music, and they're just good-hearted, friendly people. So I can see how this would have worked, even though here I am many, many years later here, moving here, not like a settler, we're not moving into a grass hut, but we still can get the same vibe that existed, I think, even back then. And it's a very warm and welcoming one.
And the attitude to Jews, I remember that you shared with me on a previous call, the particular support for the state of Israel, for Jews, what we call a philo-Semitic environment. Do you want to mention a few?
Yes, absolutely. That was in 2019, and I give thanks to a lot of people who reached out to me again and contacted me and allowed me to be a part of it. But the March of Life Parade, which is an international celebration of Holocaust commemoration and remembrance, took place in Santo Domingo, which is the capital, right on the Malecón, which is the main strip right on the waterfront. And I didn't think I knew what I was getting myself into when they asked and said, hey, would you come and be a speaker and talk about why this country should be celebrated? And I said, well, of course. And only just to find out there were 4,000 people who came to that rally. And it was a very, very huge event with a lot of people waving Israeli flags and very even wearing talit. And my wife and I were really just blown away by that.
Is that the March de la Vida? Is that the March de la Vida?
Yes, March de la Vida, which this would probably be a great time to say. And so I'm very thankful to say that, last year that was not held in 2020 based on Corona, but this year we're slating to have this year's Marcha de la Vida is scheduled to be in Sosua. Wow. So this was the part that we started from. So this talk about Bashert or Tikkun Olam or all these things that make things come around. So now the actual place where this whole story started is where we'll be stemming this parade from on April 30th this year. So, but it was just an incredible showing of, like I said, 4,000 people, extremely supportive of Israel. A lot of the community here believe that Israel is the place where all the final judgments and things per the Bible, First and Second Testament, will occur. And for whatever reason, they support Israel, they love Israel, and they have no issue with Judaism whatsoever. So I'm all totally down for that and making us feel completely welcome here.
Okay, so you, before we talk about the reenactment of the Evian conference, I know that we have quite a few actually viewers who are watching us live right now, which is very exciting. And I would like to encourage them on the Facebook chat to ask you any questions that leap to their mind. Just text the questions in the chat, and they will be directed to me through the assistance of Hodaya Blau, our coordinator. Let's go back to Evian. So Evian is an infamous chapter in the history of the Holocaust, but you take that infamous chapter and you turn it into an educational experience. You have a vision. So lay out the vision, tell us about what you did, what didn't happen, and what you'd like to do next.
Wonderful, thank you. This all began, again, after learning about Sosua and then stemming back to where was the origins of all this, that I happened to be lucky enough to be selected to be a representative to go on a business trip from the company that I work for, which was a Microsoft reseller. We had an opportunity to sell a large contract of Microsoft software to a company that was in Lausanne, Switzerland, which again, if you refer back to that photo earlier, that postcard, happened to be right across the lake from Evian. So I said, wow, talk about timing. I have an interest in this topic. My company is placing me within a 20-minute boat ride of where this hotel was. So I didn't miss the chance to go there, but I was surprised by, after going there, the fact that no one at the hotel had any idea that this conference ever took place there. In fact, they actually said, I'm sorry, sir, you're at the wrong hotel. And I did my homework and I knew for sure this was the right hotel, because they said, oh, the G8 conference or whatever. I'm like, oh, the Evian conference. And so they sat me down and they gave me an opportunity. And this gentleman, his name is Mark Figueredo, probably he is on. He at the time was the guest hotel manager that gave me the time. And basically, I'm not gonna say they were trying to kick me out, but I basically said, just give me 5 minutes at the concierge front hotel computer so I can prove that I am who I am, and that take a look at this Evian conference, look at the pictures that come up. And he was amazed. He said, yes, this is the same place. And since that, we have had a wonderful relationship that they actually have started a historic society at this hotel where they're going to be embodying a lot more of the history of things that happened there, starting with this conference. And ultimately, from that, I was able to be shown the guest manifest from the original settlers who arrived. And I was given a brass doorknob encased in acrylic, which was from the original structure as a kind of parting gift. Needless to say, this was a mind-blowing experience, and I was able to develop a relationship with this gentleman, Mark Figueredo. Hey, Mark, over a 2-year period of time that we actually were able to coordinate this official ceremony of installing a permanent World War II historic plaque, which states in this room at this time, this famous conference took place, and it lists the history that so few know about. So now, this gentleman has now become the assistant general manager of the entire hotel. So talk about getting people at the right time on their trajectory to their career. We've been great friends. He helped to arrange the original. This is it was called Evian Revisited, or Revisiting Evian. What it is basically it was an educational symposium. If you could see that. And I had 13 very capable subject matter experts from around the world come and speak about the importance of the conference. And these are just some of the folks that came.
This is the conference that happened, right? And there was one that didn't happen because of the pandemic, right?
This is the one that happened prior to. This was the first one, which is in July of 2018, July 10th and 11th of 2018. And then that same year, November 9th, was when through Dr. Shimon Samuels, who is the Director of International Relations for the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Paris, 30 years, took up an interest and said, you know what, I think there's a lot of things that we can do here. And I know someone at the United Nations, and if you come back here on November 9th, I've got a slot for us to do a press conference, bring your plaque. And we were able to do the plaque installation on Kristallnacht the same year in 2018, right in that hotel. So that was it. I know you said, think of a question, what are some of the highlights of this journey? That was absolutely one of them, being able to go to the United Nations and speak to the reporters and then take the boat ride across Lake Leman, Lake Geneva, to this hotel, and to ultimately have the presentation. You showed a clip earlier where I was clipping the royal banner. Hotel banner.
That happened when? In 2018, 19?
This happened July. The original conference was July 10th and 11th. That was the 80th commemoration because it fell right within the month when it happened, the days that happened. And then this was November 9th, Kristallnacht of the same year, 2018.
In 2018, so it was the 80th anniversary. Let's go now to questions. We have questions from the audience. The first question is, how many of the original settlers stayed in Sosua or in the Dominican Republic? I think we touched on this earlier.
Yeah, there's interestingly, I think there's about 6 or 7 families now that actually are left, because most of them moved back to the United States. It really has pared down significantly over the years. So at this point, the synagogue still functions, and we still sometimes on the high holidays and on Passover, they have not COVID times services that they hold, but ultimately, I think at this point, the last count, it's like 5 or 6. And remember, these are folks who are in their 80s. So they're the interesting part is all of their sons and daughters and their grandchildren that stem from this that really have started now to even find the fascination of this story through their parents.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. Let's imagine that now we are in 2025. God willing, before then, the coronavirus pandemic is over, and I would like to come with my family to Sosua, to the Dominican Republic, and to learn about the story of Trujillo, the Dominican Republic, and the resettlement, Sosua. What am I going to find there? Thanks to the efforts of your organization. What is the dream and the grand plan?
The dream and the vision and the bigger plan is to create a Jewish Dominican Cultural Education Center here, which would have a lot of the elements where people could come and immerse themselves in both the culture, but also have an entertaining time. So part of the Sosua75 plan is to have a sustaining an organic self-sustaining community farm, which is exactly what the descendants who came there had to do. They had to shift from their more white-collar jobs and become farmers. So they had to become agriculturalists. So I want to reenact that, or have that be a part of it, as well as a baseball field, which of course is, that's my passion. Talk about the Mirabal sisters, who are the 3 matriarchs of the country. They're the ones who overthrew the Trujillo government. They're known as Las Mariposas, or butterflies. But also, more notably, is recently in a collaboration with the Center for Latino-Jewish Relations, which is based out of Texas, and Dr. Rabbi Peter Tarlow there from College Station. We have managed to be able to envision and plan for a Caribbean headquarters of the Center for Latino-Jewish Relations here, at which point it would be a building that would have host students. I would like to create some exchange programs for students, study abroad programs, a summer camp, have people come to be able to do what they typically do here in Sosua or on the North Coast, which I think is still water sports and which is right here, but also really find out more and learn more about this history. So both of those, that CLJR, Center for Latino Jewish Relations, is slated to begin hopefully construction here, which I would be the director of that. And it's all, we're moving forward with all aspects of it, including the funding phase now. But otherwise, the grander plan for Sosua75, which I was conceived back in 2014, was to have a baseball stadium, something that would represent all of the elements of the culture here in an entertaining and educational type environment. So per the Sosua75 website, if you go to that, you'll see actually I want to give thanks to my daughter, Leah, who's the one who did that drawing for me because I wasn't going to do very much with it. She put together this beautiful drawing, which is on there now, of the conception of the plan.
What is the website, the address of the website?
Sure, it's Sosua75.org. So SOSUA7, the numeral 75.org. And you had asked this question earlier, what's the 75 for? Yeah, it fits nicely on the right corner of the Mogan David there, but it's because in 2014, the following year was going to be the 75th anniversary of the actual founding and the establishment of the colony of the Sosua city. 1940 plus, 75 years would have been 2015. And I started it in 2014.
Great. We have another question from one of our viewers. Is this chapter in the history of the Dominican Republic taught in the country's public schools, in middle school or high school? How much is the population in the Dominican Republic aware of this thing?
Well, at the time when the Jewish settlers came here, there were only 2 million people in the Dominican Republic back in the 40s. Now there's close to 11 million or 12 million. So the country has grown dramatically. As far as the teaching in the schools here, I can tell you that as a result of the Evian Revisited, that 80th anniversary commemoration conference, I asked the keynote speakers to come with not only their presentation, but a substantive suggestion of what could be taken afterward as a social action project. And one of them, their idea was, well, I'd like to be able to have Holocaust education in New Hampshire schools, public schools. And so that was an example, whereas I know in the United States now, there's up to 20 some states that have formally adopted resolutions in their local governments to make certain that Holocaust education is inserted into the curriculum. But here, you know what? I don't know the answer to that question. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you, but I'd like to know. I don't think that it's taught at all. I think it gets around by word of mouth. I'm sure there's no formal, I'm not sure. I'd like to know.
You have encountered people who have heard of the story, I suppose. People
here, now that I'm here, absolutely, because they're here. But again, they don't know a lot of the details about it. They don't look at history sometimes. That's why the tagline of my NPO is to educate and remember, because it takes both.
Before I thank you for a fascinating conversation, I wanted to thank our audience, our viewers, those who joined us live, and those who will join us and watch the recording of Holocaust Remembrance around the world. This is our third episode. We have already spoken to guests from Chile, from Rwanda, the Dominican Republic. Now we're coming closer to home, and the episode in our series will be featured on April 25th at 12 p.m. We actually moved the time to 12 p.m. to make it more convenient, both for those who rise later on Sunday morning, and also for our guests and friends and colleagues on the West Coast. The next episode will really be here home. I will be speaking to Tova Rosenberg, my colleague and the founder of Names Not Numbers. You talked already about doing perhaps a project with Names Not Numbers, which is a videography and educational project on the Holocaust, featured by the Yeshiva University high schools. So Tova will be here on April 25th, and we will continue once a month to speak to guests from all over the world. I also wanted to thank our producer, Lois Roman, who have worked tirelessly on the marketing and the coordination of the series, and to thank the coordinator of the Fish Center, Hodaya Blau, for joining us this afternoon, and for I know it wasn't that much of an easy job to pull out all the images and the videos that we showed as you were speaking.
Our primary mission at the Fish Center at Yeshiva University is bestowing a master's degree for students interested in Holocaust and genocide studies. We have a short video clip about that now.
If there's truth to the saying that history repeats itself, then Holocaust remembrance and the study of genocide is not only a vital part of history, but also a crucial warning for the future.
Confronting Holocaust deniers and distorters is one of the most important tasks of our generation.
The Fish Center at Yeshiva University was founded with this mission of preserving the history of the Holocaust as well as more recent genocides. Our master's program offers a unique investigation of the Holocaust of European Jewry with an interdisciplinary approach through the lenses of law, social work, history, theology, education, literature, and political science. If this sounds like a path you would like to pursue, apply now or learn more. I'd like to extend an invitation for you to join us and become a member of our growing community of scholars and educators.
Thank you to all of our community partners, the Holocaust and Human Rights Center in White Plains, New York, the Center for Holocaust Education in the East Valley JCC in Arizona, 3GNY, the Florida Holocaust Museum, the Rabbi Arthur Schneier Program for International Affairs at Yeshiva University, Shadowlight in Canada, Manhattan College, the Sosua75 in the Dominican Republic, the Holocaust Memorial and Museum in San Antonio, Texas, JOHANNESBURG Holocaust and Genocide Studies Center in South Africa, 2 different programs at the University of Miami, the Holocaust and Education Center in Fukuyama, Japan, the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie, the Sister Rose Thiering Fund in Education for Jewish and Christian Studies, the Lake District Holocaust Project in the UK, Jewish Gen, and the Maltz Museum in Cleveland, Ohio.
Hugh Baver, I wanted to thank you. First of all, wish you hatzlacha, wish you success with all of your activities. I think that you are an inspiration to a lot of people in the field of Holocaust education who sometimes think to themselves, what can be done? What are the things that we can do? And I see that you mentioned how you connect this chapter in history to educating about the refugees, about the way our society should think about those who look for asylum, people who sometimes find themselves being at no fault for or need for rescue for another or better life. And it's amazing how you can find all these connections and to take a painful chapter in our history and use it in order to educate the next generation. This has been fascinating, both meeting you and hopefully we can meet again and work together, maybe travel with students to Sosua one day. I certainly would not mind visiting the Dominican Republic. So we will roll up the red carpet for you and your family. Absolutely, Shai. Thank you very much. Very grateful for this time and this incredible platform through the Yeshiva. Thank you, Hugh Baver, for joining us for Holocaust Remembrance Around the World. We will be with you on April 25th at 12 p.m. Another episode featuring the United States. Thank you.